Welcome in to the college football recap. It's great to be with you as always. Good morning, wherever you are. We appreciate you joining us. My name's Jeff Cameron, and we do this every Sunday morning, 11 o'clock Eastern. Take a look around the landscape of college football and see what's what. It's exciting. We're running out of weeks, guys. We got to savor this thing. Don't want to depress you at the outset here, but man, every passing game, right? We try to take it all in, make sense of it. Every week we get new information. And it's been a fun football season when you consider how many times you thought you knew what was what and how many times that shifted because of a particular performance or a stretch of games where teams turned it around. So the ebbs and flows of college football this year have been very, very good. And with that, I want to tell you who we have on the show today. Justin Wells is going to join us from Inside Texas on Texas. Does a great job for them. He'll be our first guest. Corey Clark for warchant.com. Florida State has turned it around this year and coming off some decided wins. He'll talk about the game against Syracuse. And Anthony Broom, who's been a frequent guest on the show as Michigan continues to roll. They had an easy win over Nebraska. Everybody turning their attention towards Ohio State, no doubt, and Michigan later in the year. Should be fun. All right, let's get to that top 25 scoreboard. If you would, Matthew, we'll post that, get that rolling. No real surprises as we start with Ohio State. They dominated this football game. Miyan Williams rushed for 447 yards and a touchdown. Unfortunately, left with an injury. C.J. Stroud able to cruise through, have 5 TD passes as well. Ohio State wins going away, as you would suspect, against Indiana. Now, Georgia and Mississippi State. Stetson Bennett threw for 3 touchdowns. The Bulldogs secured a spot in the SEC championship game. Georgia will face SEC West champion LSU in Atlanta on December the 3rd. A dominating effort from Georgia, 10-0, 7-0 in the SEC now, put up 468 yards of offense. I mentioned Michigan a moment ago, 34-3. Blake Corum had 162 yards rushing and a touchdown on 28 carries. The Wolverines roll on in anticipation for their showdown with Ohio State. TCU and Texas, a game we're going to get more into in a moment. Everybody thought this would be a high-scoring affair. Obviously, it was not. The two defenses carried the day. Kendre Miller rushed for 138 yards. Had a 75-yard touchdown in the third quarter. That broke open that tense defensive struggle in Austin. TCU gets the win over Texas, 17-10. Texas struggling to score in the second half of games. We'll talk about that more in detail in a bit. Tennessee, 66-24 over Mizzou. You'll see some outlandish numbers from this football game. Hendon Hooker, by the way, threw for 355 yards and 3 touchdowns, 66 points in an SEC game, the most for Tennessee ever. Washington and Oregon turned out to be the game we all hoped it would be, a wild affair that ends with Washington beating Oregon 37-34. Peyton Henry kicking a 43-yard field goal with just 51 seconds left. They snap Oregon's 8-game win streak, and they really take out the chances of Oregon making it into the college football playoff. That's the end of an 8-game win streak for them. LSU, Arkansas, this game we kind of thought might be ugly. Remember early in the week when the numbers came out, you saw it's a 3.5-point, 3-point spread. Wonder why. Letdown spot. Justin Jefferson doesn't play. LSU does get the win 13-10. They will go to the SEC championship game. They are 8-2, 6-1 in the SEC, and they had a big defensive performance in this one from Harold Perkins Jr. The freshman was outstanding in this one. USC the other night blew out Colorado 55-17. Not much to say there. Caleb Williams rushed for 2 touchdowns and passed for 3 more. It was an electric night for him, but there are some injury concerns in the backfield now for USC. Alabama goes on the road, gets the win against Ole Miss 30-24. Bryce Young threw 3 touchdown passes. Alabama scored on 4 consecutive possessions spanning the second and third quarters to really kind of take control of this game. It was a fun one to watch and close like many suspected it would be. Arizona with the surprise upset of UCLA. It was a weekend in which the Pac-12 kind of cannibalized itself yet again. It seems to happen every single season. That is a bad loss for UCLA. A big win for Arizona, 34-28. They snap an 8-game road losing streak against ranked teams. Utah crushed Stanford 42-7. Not much to talk about there. Cam Rising threw 3 touchdown passes. Penn State shut out Maryland 30-0. Want to talk about hurt your feelings? At halftime, Maryland had all of 27 yards. Ouch. Purdue knocks off Illinois, and what was already a muddled mess in the west of the Big Ten continues to be just that. That gives Purdue the tiebreaker over Illinois now, if in fact it comes down to that kind of a deciding factor. We had Central Florida over Tulane. Tulane had been a covering machine this year. They lose at home in New Orleans 38-31. John Reese Plumlee accounting for 308 yards and 3 touchdowns. UCF takes over first place in the American Athletic Conference. K-State crushes Baylor 31-3. Hard to get a read on the Big 12 every week. Strange results. That is a decided victory for the Wildcats, who are now 7-3, 5-2 overall. Cincinnati beat East Carolina. Also of note, Florida State with a second dominating performance. Also, Notre Dame gets a win in a game that turned out to be a lot closer than many thought it would be against Air Force. As it is, that's your look at the top 25. We have an opportunity to bring in Justin Wells inside Texas. Does a great job covering the Longhorns. We're going to talk to him right now. In fact, and Justin, good morning. Thanks for the time as always, buddy.
Hey now, nice to meet you, Jeff. Absolutely thankful to have me on this morning, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get straight to it. I am kind of curious your thoughts. Texas has held under 200 yards. First time since 2015 that's happened against Notre Dame way back then. And this is a tough loss, I imagine, to take because obviously it was a big recruiting weekend. Why don't we start with that? A lot of recruits in town. We also know game day was there. This isn't the result Texas expected to get. Do you think it has any deleterious effect on recruiting?
From the recruiting standpoint, I don't think it'll have too much. Texas has about 5 or 6 spots left in this 2023 class. They brought in, like you said, some of the biggest names in the country were on hand. They're trying to close with a handful of 5 stars and high 4 stars down the stretch. It's one of those. I tell fans all the time, recruits don't make decisions based on a game to game basis. That's just not how they're wired. That's a fan mentality. But if you're an offensive player, a recruit, you probably didn't like much of what you saw. A team that's Texas, one of the highest scoring teams in the country, just could not get in gear, just could not get out of neutral. It was one of those things where they just kind of slogged through it. Whereas if you're a defensive recruit, you saw some really, really good football. You saw some great play. I believe TCU was either 6th or 7th in the country in scoring coming into the game. The defense just was lights out, Jeff. I mean, the first 18 plays, Texas had 8 tackles for loss. They were running and rallying to the football like they did earlier in the year, and they looked fantastic. It was 3-0 at halftime. A game that, if you took the under, you went to bed a happy person because the points were hard to come by. TCU mounted a few drives in the second half and were able to put up points. Whereas with Texas, they got down in the red zone inside the 5-yard line twice with a 1st and goal. And Bijan Robinson didn't touch the ball one time in any of those plays. So in hindsight, that looks kind of like a bad decision. But at the end of the day, like I said, recruits don't base it on a game-to-game basis. Get to catch up a little bit with Anthony Hill's family last night. The 5-star linebacker had an absolute good time. This was him kind of getting back into the mix after decommitting from Texas A&M the week before. He's getting closer to a lot of those players. He has bonds on that team with Jatavian Sanders and Austin Jordan. Ryan Watts and him grew up together. Savion Red, Xavier Bryce. He's got a lot of friends in that program. So I felt like Texas did a really good job with Anthony Hill, and he's definitely a priority on that side of the ball. But, if you're an offensive recruit, you probably looked at it as like, that wasn't a very good showing. Whereas if you're a defensive guy, you see an opportunity to come in and play right away. Give TCU credit, Jeff. I thought they played incredible football on the defensive side of the ball. I felt like TCU's defense would be the weakness. It wasn't. Those guys came prepared and locked and loaded. And so at the end of the day, TCU got the best of them.
Justin, I am curious because I watched a lot of this game. It was a fun game to watch because it was so physical, and I love a good physical brand of football. You're right. We expected to see offensive fireworks. We didn't get it. Both defenses carried the day, a dominating performance. Bijan Robinson is as exciting a football player as there is in the country, a truly unique and gifted running back, 12 carries, 29 yards. Did you think you'd ever see that in a situation like this?
Hell no. Listen, before the game, He needed 41 yards, Jeff, to get to 3,000 for his career at Texas in basically 26, 27 games. A fantastic number. He never got it. That story is still sitting in drafts. If you would have told me that we wouldn't publish that during the game, I would have called you silly. That was, if you want a microcosm of the root problem of this loss, look at Bijan Robinson's stats. It just did not work. And it wasn't from a lack of attempting. Now, I felt like they got away from him in the second half. And a guy like Bijan, you got to keep feeding. He's one of those old school NFL volume type carry guys. When we used to play fantasy football back in the day, there was no running back by committee. It was one guy. He toted the rock for 30 times a game, and you knew who you can rely on. Bijan's that type of guy. And coming off a big win on the road against Kansas State, a good Kansas State defense where he got the ball a season high 30 times, I don't understand why you wouldn't go back to that well. Well, the problem was the offensive line. There was no push. The TCU defensive front was outstanding, Jeff, and they could not get that surge that they needed. So often you would see him just a little short of the marker, for a first down to try to move the chains. For so often you would see a bad pass. Ewers did not have a good game whatsoever, probably his worst as a Longhorn to this point. Some of the play calling was essentially suspect. And when you only target 3 people in the passing game for the entire game, that's a problem. That's something that needs to be fixed. And so I don't think any one of us came into this game thinking it was going to be a defensive showdown. But the lack of getting any sort of push from the offensive line and getting Bijan Robinson just a little crease, I think really reared its ugly head as the game went on. And then Quinn Ewers, he just couldn't get it going. Now, granted, towards the second, later in the game, they mounted a few drives. They just couldn't get it in the end zone. They just couldn't punch it in. And like we talked about earlier, 2 times inside the red zone, 1st and goal from the 5, 1st and goal from the 4. They ran 8 plays. Bijan Robinson wasn't involved in any of them. And to me, that's borderline criminal.
So I'm curious about 2 things. What did Sark say about that after the game? And then moreover, are Texas fans getting slightly concerned with Quinn Ewers? Because this was a really ugly game for him. 17 of 39, $171. Like you said, he really honed in on just a couple of guys, was hell-bent on trying to hit the deep pass again. And we've seen that from him before where he falls in love with that. You have arguably one of the best players in the country in the backfield. I got to imagine Texas fans today are infinitely frustrated by those choices. And at the end of the day, Sark has to answer for that.
He did. He said that they wanted to go to Bijan more, but they couldn't find those holes. Give TCU credit. They played incredibly sound gap control. And a few of those you felt like, well, Bijan could have bounced it to the outside or Bijan could have gone back to this side. But it's so easy for us to say that when we're sitting where we are and we're not on the field and in the moment with those guys trying to make those reads. It just felt like Bijan couldn't get out of neutral. It just felt like he couldn't get into that. And the thing with Quinn Ewers, Texas fans don't need to worry because we have to understand he's still a freshman. This kid's still 19 years old. And I think in this day and age of instant gratification, if we don't see the immediate impact from a 5-star player, well, he's just not that good or, oh, he can't play at this level. The world doesn't work that way. Quinn Ewers is going through the learning, the trials and tribulations of being a freshman quarterback. He had a tremendous first half against Alabama. He had a tremendous game against Oklahoma. He had a good game against Iowa State. Those are the good ones. He had a stinker in Stillwater, Jeff.
Yeah.
His worst game to this point. And then he had a stinker last night. That's part of going through the quarterback. Bobby Burton and I talked about this earlier on Texas football. Did I ever feel like a point where they should have gone to Hudson Card, if they should have made a different decision? And my answer was no. It's not, because you can't just pick and choose at that point. You have to stick with the horse that you brought. And Quinn is going to learn experience going through this adversity. This is how he's going to be better. Plus, I don't think it would have been fair to Card to bring him into a situation where they weren't protecting very well anyway, and the receivers weren't doing as well. And you'd kind of gotten away from your lead horse, which was Bijan. 12 carries. You're not going to win any games in Austin, Texas when Bijan Robinson's your tailback and he's got 12 carries. You're not going to do it. You need to be more creative. If that means running some outside zone compared to inside zone, if that means running some misdirection, we've seen Sark be real creative in scheming open his guys throughout the season. On Saturday night, I didn't see any of that, Jeff. That's my cause for concern. It's not the development of Quinn Ewers. It's not who he's going to be, which is going to be a tremendous quarterback one day at this level and the pro level. It's where was the play calling? Where was the adjustments? And where was the usage of a guy that, listen, that seat in New York City for the Heisman ceremony, it was getting really warm for number 5. It was getting really warm up until this game. We were looking at him possibly being there after that stretch of 4 games where he's been tremendous. You can forget that dream. Bijan's going to be hanging out with family in December rather than hanging out in New York.
Last couple of things, Justin. Just curious, your coverage inside Texas this week. What can we expect to get as we mosey on over to the great website to watch Texas finish out this season? And also, secondarily, just kind of curious, if you take the pulse of Texas fans, where are they at right now with Sark?
Frustrated. I still think there's optimism. There has to be. Sark has done a great job in changing the culture in this program. And I say that because if you look at this team 9 months ago compared to now, the buy-in is unanimous. There is Sark got rid of a lot of the malcontents last year. There was some hangover, some overlap from the Tom Herman days. He got rid of most of those guys. And that's the thing you have to understand. If you talk to recruits, a lot of times you'd say, what did you think about the field? They'll tell you. What did you think about the locker room? He's like, that's what blows them away because these guys play so hard for each other. They really like each other. And at this level, I feel like that's so important because they're still kind of young. They're not in that pro stage just yet. So for fans, it's frustration. But understand they're already making more progress this year than they were last year. But in Austin, the expectations are generally a little bit higher than they usually should be. And so you look at it like Kansas is coming up. That's going to be a tough one in Lawrence because those guys are well coached. They do a good job. And then they've got to finish the regular season with Baylor. And that's always a fist fight, especially when those guys come to Austin from Waco. And so this week you're going to see more recruiting stuff because we're like almost 4 weeks from early national signing day. It's a personal holiday for me, quite frankly. That's my own Christmas. I absolutely love it. Come see us at InsideTexas.com because we are a recruiting machine. We're going to talk more about, where recruits are, where this class is headed. Still a top 5, top 6 class in the On3 rankings right now. I don't expect that to change. And also, a lot of feedback from recruits because, like you said, there were a lot of big-name guys that were on campus this last weekend. We'll catch up with a handful of those as well, especially I'll have an Anthony Hill update here pretty quick at InsideTexas.com. But that's what these are the growing pains of the freshman quarterback. Yep. And I can take that. What I can't take is a coaching staff that doesn't adjust on the fly as well as we think they should. I'm seeing a trend, Jeff. 3 halves, straight halves.
Without an offensive touchdown, yeah.
Without an offensive touchdown. Buddy, that's a problem. And that's not only a problem for a team in the bigger scheme of things of football. That's a problem for a team that's known for scoring. That means the defenses in this conference have started figuring things out. And that if you can't make adjustments and you get set into that tendencies type style, that's a hard road to drive back on, man.
It's going to be fun to watch, so I would invite everybody to do just that and follow you. You can see the Twitter handle right there, Inside Texas, the website for On3. They do an incredible job. It's still a lot to kind of vet here before this season ends, in particular with the recruiting. As we all know, it's about the Jimmies and Joes. Got to get those guys in here. The X's and O's tend to take care of themselves when that happens. Justin, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, man. I appreciate you hopping on with us. Good to talk to you.
Hey, man, absolute pleasure meeting you. I appreciate you guys having me. Matthew, Take it easy.
He's speaking to our producer, good old director Matthew. He's the man. That is Justin Wells, Inside Texas. A guy I know really, really well is who we're going to pivot to now. My cohort, Corey Clark, warchant.com, another great On3 site. What's up, Corey? How are you this morning, baby?
I'm good, man. Love the hat. Always love your hats.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. So let's just say it. How good is Florida State? Or better yet, we know they're good. Are they top 10 good right now?
Man, it's look, Who knows, Jeff? I know that other than Georgia and Ohio State, I think they could beat anybody in the country the way they're playing. That doesn't mean they would, but I would be surprised if they played anybody else in the country and just weren't in the game in the fourth quarter. I mean, it's one thing to beat the likes of Syracuse and Miami. You don't beat the bejesus out of them like Florida State is doing. Like that's not that, Syracuse did have their quarterback. It didn't matter. Florida State just puts up points and yards on anyone, man. And it's not normal what's going on. I said that a bunch last night, but it's the truth. They're not just winning these games. They are dominating like it's 1994 again. This isn't what normally happens in college football in 2022, to go on the road and win 2 straight games by a total of whatever, 83-6. And the games weren't even that close, honestly. I mean, that game last night, the 38-3 that you're looking at there could have been 50-3. 52-3. I mean, they called off the Dogs pretty darn early, and yeah, it's just I think I think the way they're playing, you can't tell me there are 9 teams in the country playing better than them right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've watched them kind of graduate and grow up before our eyes. There were a lot of questions, and there are a lot of people watching us throughout the country right now on various On3 websites, and they may not be as tuned in to Florida State, especially after that little losing streak, but you've watched them come out from that and respond the way that a team who's taking the next step should, right? Which is you're not down on your luck, you're not self-pitying, you're not doing any of those things, you're going out and making a statement, and you're seeing it come to fruition. In particular, though, Corey, would you say the most surprising element, if I were to, again, for people who are not locked in on Florida State, if at the beginning of the year, I would tell you that Florida State's offensive line is going to take turns dominating defensive lines, including the likes of Clemson, let's say, and that is going to be the strength of the team, is going to be the offensive line. Or if I told you that the Oregon transfer, Trey Benson, was going to emerge as quite possibly one of the best running backs in the country and will go into next season thinking as such, or that Jordan Travis would be a really good drop-back passer and not have to rely on his legs. What element would you say that has been most surprising about Florida State this year, especially now that they are dominating their opponents?
Probably the O-line, because they've run for yardage since Norvell got here. They find ways to scheme it up. There are times in these games, though, where it's not just, hey, we're smarter than you. I mean, they're moving guys out of the way, pushing guys out of the way, proud defenses. Just moving them like they're, again, like it's 1995. In fact, Jeff, they had a note last night that Florida State has now rushed for over 200 yards in 5 straight games. That's the first time it's happened since Warwick Dunn was a junior in 1995. I mean, this is historical stuff. It's the first time they've scored 38 or more in 3 straight ACC conference games since, of course, 2013. And before that, it was 2001. So when you might hear Florida State media or fans getting excited about these last 3 games, you're looking at the competition. You're like, well, yeah, they were favored to win all those. Those aren't great teams they're beating. It's not that they're winning the games. It's how they're winning the games. And they're doing it so physically on both sides of the football, man. It doesn't seem like smoke and mirrors are just, we've got a good hotshot coach that's innovative. No, man. They are winning because they appear to be bigger and stronger and better than their opposition, much better than their opposition, apparently.
Yeah, and the defense is where I want to shift to now, because I think we had question marks. I mean, earlier in the year, we were beginning to see signs that obviously the offense was going to take the next step. Jordan Travis was better as a passer. They didn't have to rely on him to just scramble and all that kind of stuff. You began to realize they were emerging there. They were better and deeper on the offensive line. They've had injuries there, but yet they were able to run. So you could see this, though. Receiving core was better. But I think defensively is now where we go, because I've mentioned before, and we've talked about it some, Corey, that the numbers look really good for this defense, but you're not real sure how believable it is, because some of the offenses that they've faced haven't been very good. And there have been moments like the Wake game, like the Clemson game, where they played some of the better offenses. They didn't get the stops they needed. How good is the defense? Because they're putting up right now dominating numbers. But what can we believe in about this defense right now?
Yeah, I don't know how you do WAR when it comes to college football defensive linemen, but apparently Fabian Lovitz would be off the charts. He's the defensive tackle for Florida State. They are very good when he's on the field. Just him being in the mix changes everything. He came back really 3 weeks ago. Yeah. And they have given up 1 competitive touchdown in 3 weeks, Jeff. The Georgia Tech scored on the final play of the game when it was 41-10. Their only other touchdown was right after halftime after recovering the onside kick when they hit a 3rd and 16 play. That's the only touchdown Florida State's given up in 3 weeks. That's 23 straight drives. It's 1 touchdown in the last 28 drives. This is championship level stuff. And I still don't know if they're a championship caliber defense. Like, I still don't know if I truly believe it because of how bad the offenses have been that they faced. But they're also making them look horrendous. Like, I watched that Miami offense on Saturday against Georgia Tech. It didn't look like a JV offense like the one that Florida State made it look like. So I think Florida State is impacting these games, impacting these offenses to the point where they look, somewhat childish. They look like JV, high school, middle school football teams. They don't do anything. To answer your question, once they play Florida, that's the litmus test, right? That's a real offense that they're going to face. They have not performed well against great offenses. They haven't performed horribly, but they haven't performed great. That's the litmus test. But it surely is a good sign that they are absolutely suffocating these teams, not letting them breathe. Like, Syracuse had 3 first downs. That's 3 straight games. The opponent has had less than 70 yards of offense at halftime.
It's a strange. We've watched transformations before at Florida State. You and I have covered that program, and we've seen them go from bad to good to great. It feels like they're certainly in the good, on the verge of possibly being great. If you project out from here for Florida State, for those that don't know, recruiting class-wise, Corey, final thing I'll ask you, how much of a jump do you see in the next 3.5, 4 weeks for this program now that has, the quote-unquote proof of concept stuff that you hear so often? They've certainly done that. Mike Norvell is solidified now. He's not going to be going anywhere. People can trust that, hey, whether it's a recruit or an assistant coach that he may want to bring in, the regime is safe. He's not going anywhere.
Well, they went from a team 2 years ago that was getting blown off the field by anyone with a pulse to now blowing everybody off the field. So when you talk about the proof of concept and you're a recruit, I get it. I get the guys 2 years ago not believing in what they were doing. How could you? You hadn't seen it. Well, now you have. So look, man, they're 17th now in recruiting rankings. Maybe they crack the top 12-ish, which I think is a good finish. It's that next class. It's these kids that are juniors that have watched this thing build now for 2 years that really start to believe in his message and what he's doing. And again, Jeff, we know it's 2022. This is the class of 2023. The portal is wide open. And Florida State has made its hay with the portal. And I think, again, you don't want to build your whole program with that. But I think there's going to be 6, 7, 8 spots that now they're going to have to be turning kids away because of what they're doing with these guys in the portal. You mentioned Trey Benson, Johnny Wilson, Jared Verse, Jermaine Johnson. Like, these guys are becoming stars at Florida State. So it's just going to, I think, the portal, again, will be a huge benefit for Florida State. And it really helps now that you're going to have 8 or 9 wins, maybe possibly 10, and go to an actual bowl game, man. The Noles are going bowling. What's going on here?
Back to the world of college football the way it's supposed to be, right? With some of the elite
exactly
teams
right.
becoming elite again. Corey, always appreciate it, brother. Be well. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
I love you.
Love you too. That's Corey Clark. If you can't tell, we know each other. That would have been a weird send-off if that was a random stranger that we're having on the show that happens to work at a different On3 site. But it's fun to watch. It's, Florida State was the talking point right there because Corey Clark covers Florida State for warchant.com, another On3 outlet. All of our guests today are On3 outlet guests, of course. And in a moment, we'll bring on Anthony Broom here, we hope, from the Wolverine and discuss Michigan, who cruised obviously rather handily against an outgunned Nebraska team, another team that I cover. But that said, these are the storylines in college football. Like we were just talking about Texas a moment ago with Justin, who does a great job, Justin Wells with Inside Texas. And when you think of Texas or you think of Florida State or you think of the bigger brands in college football, ideally, and I know fans would say, I really don't care how anybody else is doing at a given time. I understand that. But if you take a step back and you look at the big picture of college football, one of the things to note to me is certainly that if you get Texas operating at peak efficiency. They're not there yet, obviously. If you get Florida State operating at peak efficiency, not quite there yet, but starting to show signs. If you have what we've seen this year, the emergence of a Tennessee out of the SEC East to go along with what George is doing, obviously, as the representative of the East. If Florida, under first-year coach Billy Napier, is able to get back to where they're operating at peak efficiency, then all of a sudden you start looking around, you see what's going on with USC right now, and you just need a few others where we have more hats in the ring and have fun with it. Last year it began, we were talking about what Michigan did. Anthony Broom's going to join us right now to talk about Michigan with another easy win. You want, if you're a big fan of college football, you want these brands that we've talked about today, Florida State and USC and Texas and others, to emerge all simultaneously and let the bloodbath begin. There he is. Anthony Broom from the Wolverine joins us again. Hey, Anthony, how are you? Good morning, buddy.
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. Look, that's a ho-hum win. We know what it was going to be all along, but I guess let's look big picture here. It's nice to be able to sleepwalk in a game like that against Nebraska. Did Michigan come out healthy from this game?
A couple guys banged up. Donovan Edwards was, as Jim Harbaugh put it, working through something. I think he'll be fine moving forward. They were without Luke Schoonmaker, their starting tight end, still without starting right tackle and Trente Jones. But I think for the most part, they come out of this game relatively unscathed. There wasn't Mike Morris injury at the end of the game. That we'll see what happens there. But, nothing I've heard coming out of last night's game would suggest any concern for, maybe guys sit out next week. But the big one's 2 weeks from yesterday against Ohio State. I don't have concern about any guys in that regard yet.
Yeah, Michigan continues to bludgeon people on the ground. You saw it yet again in this game. Every week it's fun to watch Blake Corum run the football, another 160-plus yard game for him. Offensive line leading the way. This is one of, if not the best rushing attack in college football. Fun to watch. I would imagine right now that the continued successes of Michigan football has led to what should be a great recruiting class. We're getting close now where we start to look a little bit in that direction. Give me big picture outlook for Michigan's recruiting class right now.
Yeah, recruiting is, to be frank, not probably where it should be at the moment. They had a lot of momentum coming out of, they cleaned up really well at the end of the last, before the last early signing period. After you beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten, and then, during the offseason you have, there's some NIL stuff. Michigan's been a little bit slow to adapt there. Jim Harbaugh, goes through the little dance that he did with the Minnesota Vikings. So recruiting he's taken a bit of a hit. There are some guys in the class that I think have some bright long-term outlooks. And even, you go back to the guys from the last recruiting class, how we tie this all together in terms of big picture outlook. I think right now this program has a nice little 2-3 year window where, with the core group of guys that they have on the roster now, mixed with some of the guys that they have coming up, I think they have staying power. For them to stay where they're at past this 2 or 3 year stretch, whatever it winds up being, you've got to keep hammering away at it. Michigan's a school that typically pre-NIL is recruiting at a top 10 level, top 5 level some years. And this current class hasn't been that yet, but so some things to kind of work on there. But this is everything that's happening right now at Michigan has staying power, and quite frankly, still has so much room to improve too.
Well, and I think this is fun to talk big picture here, Anthony, because you alluded to it just a moment ago. Harbaugh's dalliance with the NFL in the offseason with the Minnesota Vikings no doubt had to have hurt the prospects of recruiting, because if you're a recruit, you want to know who you're going to go play for, and if you're uncertain, if he's still making overtures towards the NFL. Now you have a situation where the Indianapolis Colts obviously have hired Jeff Saturday. We know Harbaugh's connections to the Indianapolis Colts. I don't know if Jeff Saturday is the long-term answer. It is a weird hire, to say the least, but I am kind of curious. Has there been talk there in Ann Arbor about whether or not Harbaugh would be interested in that job if it were to come available?
Yeah, it seems like every year it's been sort of the NFL rumors that cry wolf. And then last year he actually winds up getting on a plane and going to Minnesota. So it's tough to say. No matter what people say about what they know about Jim Harbaugh's intentions, he doesn't have an agent. He keeps his circle pretty tight, and he's a bit unpredictable when it comes to matters close to him. So I tend to believe that, he got the new contract from Michigan, signed the new contract from Michigan. with Michigan continuing to win at this pace and the money that's pouring into the program, it's probably would behoove them to put a little more money in his pocket. I don't think he wants to. I don't think he wants to be anywhere else. I think the last couple of years we've seen a guy who is, I think, as loose as he's been. I think is having as much fun as he's ever had coaching this football team, and winning football games obviously helps with that. But I think as long as he feels the love from the University of Michigan and the administration, which the new university president loves him. I know he's got a supporter in Ward Manuel in the athletic department, guy who held on to him when a lot of people said they probably should have fired him after the COVID season. So he has support there, but I do think that if you want to keep this build moving along, the resources have to just keep pouring in, and he has to feel the support and the respect that, quite frankly, at this point he deserves.
I would think it's just, I'm just riffing here. You and I are having a conversation. It seems to me from a distance that this is the perfect scenario. He was able to hang in there, survive a couple of near firings, if you will, or potentially. They're playing the brand of football that he adores, right? This is what he wants. Michigan wants to bludgeon people. He wants to play the old Stanford offense that he had. He's making money. He's back in good graces. Michigan, I would think, is not in any trouble from an NIL standpoint. They've got a ton of money. Like, why would you be looking anywhere else? To me, this is, you would set it and forget it and be here for the next 10 to 15 years and get ready for your annual war with Ohio State.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I think that's where things are right now. I mean, I haven't heard anything, since the two sides kind of came back together after that Vikings thing that would suggest that there's any friction or a lack of support there. I think both sides know that they've got things pretty good right now. There's a lot of programs across college football that would kill for, this is now that Michigan's 10-0, the fifth time under Jim Harbaugh they've done that. It's the first time they've ever started 10-0 under him. First time they've done it since 2006. They're 22-2 over the last 24 games with him at the helm. To me, I mean, whatever it takes to keep this train rolling, it's no questions asked to me. I mean, whatever, if there needs to be a little bit of a raise, if there needs to be more money added to the assistant coaching staff, which I think his staff has been phenomenal too. And that's a huge reason for why they've been able to kind of turn things around these last couple of years is the talent and the aptitude of the guys on that staff. I don't see a scenario where I don't think we're going through the same things this February that we were last year. I think is the easiest way for me to put it. It's all hands on deck right now, and quite frankly, where it should be.
Anthony, obviously a lot of excitement surrounding Michigan football right now, and you guys are covering it at the Wolverine. As far as that coverage goes, what could we look forward to if we were to jump on there today and read what you guys are producing, and what do we have to look forward to? Obviously, it's the build up to the showdown with Ohio State, but I want to give you a chance to expound on what we can expect to see at the Wolverine.
Yeah, I mean, it's the 10th week in a row where we've had just kind of casual domination from this team. So at this point, the takeaways are they are what they have been. But I mean, no one, again, I don't want to get up here and pontificate, but I think in our market, no one puts out a better post-game package. I mean, we've got every single angle covered, from a post-game live reactions to offensive and defensive notes to columns from guys like Chris Ballas and John Borton and Clayton Safey, who's a content machine as well. So, yeah, I mean, just about every single angle you could ever imagine having covered coming out of that football game, we've got it there. And it's been that way every week too. So it's been, these are, as you know, these are a lot easier to do when the team is winning and people are excited and they'll click on whatever you throw out there. But yeah, we're now kind of in this, once Michigan got past that Michigan State game, it's all eyes on Ohio State. And, there's this building, I would say in years past, like a building anxiety towards it, but now it's like a building anxiousness.
Yeah.
Let's get there and do it 2 times in a row. So yeah, been a lot of fun and so much content at our site, and, proud to be a part of it.
And you can get it right now for just $10 all the way. So like let's do this now. Everybody jump on board, sign up. It's $10. What are we waiting on? Anthony, always good to talk to you, man. Be well. We'll talk to you again, I'm sure, the week of the Michigan-Ohio State game.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Take care. That is Anthony Broom of the Wolverine. As we said earlier, would always invite you to check out these On3 sites. Justin Wells, Inside Texas, Corey Clark, warchant.com, Anthony Broom, the Wolverine. These guys and the rest of the On3 sites, the best in the business covering the sport we all love, college football. I want to thank my producer, Matthew Hutchinson. I want to thank all of you as well. Don't forget, we'll be right back here next Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern. We'll highlight 3 games like we do every week. We'll take a look around all of college football, certainly within that top 25. Give you some thoughts there as we get down to the nitty-gritty. Some of the rivalry games are forthcoming. There's still room for those that are battling to try to get into the college football playoff. Maybe we'll see some upsets along the way. Sport offers so much that we love. We're going to cherish these last few weeks, so join us every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Right here on On3. Until next week, enjoy the football, everybody. Be well. Have a great rest of your Sunday. We'll talk again soon.